For a moment, I thought my wife was not sitting over there, but somewhere over here. Having my stole straightened. So every year, we are drawn to this place. Not necessarily to Grace Church, but what we seek to be offered here. What we seek to be offered here. The warm colors of the poinsettias, the familiarity of Christmas carols, the candles, and yes, the story. Those of us who came at 4 o'clock today found the story personified in all of the young children that sort of just filled up this space right in front of me. And had a little doll and a little cradle, and they had sheep, and we had donkeys, and we had shepherds, and we had a Joseph, and we had a Mary, and we had some angels. We're all drawn. We're drawn to this place. We step out of ourselves for a moment. We step out of ourselves for a moment and we begin to dream. We turn off the ugly. We turn off the ugly and we behold beauty. That's what tonight is all about. There's nothing more beautiful, more uplifting of our spirits than to behold a newborn. It's where hope resides. The possibility of new things that can emerge. The New York Times commentator David Brooks, who appears weekly on the place where Donna and I chiefly get our news, which is Public Broadcasting Service, PBS, was asked for what he was most thankful for as he approached Christmas. And I think the idea was that he was to evaluate the political scene over the year and bring a highlight, something that happened that he was thankful for. Well, he wished right by there. Right past that question, he suddenly said, well, I'm standing in New York City and I'm by the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Just imagine that. And he says, this is a time that makes you more alive. And then he quoted the 2nd century saint Irenaeus, who said, and this is the glory of God, a human being fully alive. What does God seek of us? A human being fully alive. That's what reflects the glory of God. And he went on to say, and so you watch the children with glory in their eyes, and you can't help think that this is a special and magical season, whether you're a believer or not a believer. But for those of us, he said, who are believers, this season is when the Lord is more present in the world just because of the radical reality of God coming down, being born in a manger that smells like dung. It's just magic, he says. And so you see it spilling out in the children and everyone, spilling out right there on the streets. I suppose around Rockefeller Center in New York City. It's very possible this is precisely the response that the evangelists, Matthew and especially Luke, wanted to evoke from us. The wonder and the hope and the desire for peace and for justice. And the Gospel of John joins them too, though he doesn't say a word about how Jesus was born. He simply calls Jesus the Word. God's command, if you like. God's self-expression out of which all things, he says, came to be. He was light. He is light in darkness. And just like this blue planet among the darkness of space. To see him, to see Jesus, says John, is to see God full of glory and grace. A love that can't help itself, which is what we call grace. So welcome to Grace tonight. Welcome to this place. Welcome to these people, the people who can't help themselves from loving you. Can't help themselves from loving you. We've been here 150 years, you know, and are planning to celebrate those 150 years. But what a theme. Welcome to Grace, celebrating 150 years. We can't help but love you. Luke with John and Matthew were doing more than telling the story of Jesus' birth in the gospel stories, provoking our emotions as we listen and later as we engage and sing in silent night and in the semi-darkness. There's more going on. Some of us in actually 2 small groups that meet here in this church on a Monday have been studying a book called The First Christmas by Dominic Crossan and Marcus Borg. And they remind us that of the reality into which Jesus was born. Among many things that they say, they remind us that his upbringing was in Nazareth. And he would grow up among men and women who would remember the pillaging of their town by the Romans that came from Syria, the Syrian legion that came sweeping through and would have had to gone through Nazareth and that whole area. And as they did so, they pillaged and they did all those violent things. In other words, he grew up more like a child surrounded by rubble, the rubble of violence and of oppression. In my office in Iowa, I had a single portrait of Jesus that I could put on the wall at the end of the little room in which I used to meet people for appointments. I had a choice. What Jesus was I going to put there? I had one laughing Jesus that I would put at the beginning of my office and in the entranceway. I had other Jesuses, but the one that I chose was one called Jesus as a Palestinian, Jesus as a refugee, looking through barbed wire at the world. See, this is a night of wonder, but it's also a night when we remember that that stable was not a very pleasant place. Yes, it smelt like dung. That's why when the Pope gives his annual Christmas address, he often highlights the lowlights of the events in the world. I don't know what he has said this year. I know he's complained about backbiting in the Vatican, but I think he moved on from there. I'm sure the people of Sudan and their expanding famine, and the people of Gaza, and the children in particular, the ongoing suffering in Ukraine and whatever other regional disasters exist of the day. I'm sure all of those get a mention. They get a mention on this night, and they need to get a mention on this night. In one sense, it's almost as though Palestine itself has always been the crux, the crossroads of the world's struggle. Something tells us if we can make peace there, where Jews and Muslims and Christians meet, we actually have made peace that actually is hope. Yet Christmas is a special and a magical time because God chose to come into the smell of a stable. Because it's from there, from the lowliest point of our existence, that transformation takes place. And what permission is granted to us to not pretend that we have to be of a certain way or a certain part of control or in control. We can be the most devastated people that has ever existed on earth according to our own minds. But that's okay because this is where transformation takes place. God comes into that stable. The contrast between the new life that is in that filthy manger is not intended to pass us by. It's not intended to pass us by, because despair can become hope, and hatred can become love, and sorrow can become joy. The authors of that first Christmas present the Christmas gospel stories as overtures for the life of Jesus that is to come. All their major themes that they see in his life and in his death and in his resurrection, all the things that happened to him and happened around him in the course of his existence. For Matthew, his fulfillment of the law of Moses, his true sense of being a true king. The reign, his having a reign that was over love over violence and domination. For Luke, his place as God among us, worthy of all worship and veneration. His embrace of the poor, the second class of society. His uplifting of women and their standing in this world. All these were purposes for which Jesus lived and died and lived again. And all those things are on this night, are present in this night, in what the angels had to say, in what the shepherds saw, in what was going on in the stable itself. The shepherds once more were more than first responders. They were the lowly for whom Jesus came. And they were first to recognize his glory. So it's traditional for us always to find our place in this scene. But how beautiful to think that we are to let Christmas be the overtures not only of Jesus' life, but the overture of our life. To start from this place for the rest of our lives. To find magical ways for us to live, magical ways for us to grow in the light of the hope and the promise and the peace and the justice that Christmas brings. We dare to hope again. We dare to love again. We dare to rejoice again. Yes, we dare to find peace again. I was once heard a Russian Orthodox bishop, Archbishop Anthony Bloom. I was about your age. I'm guessing your general age. I went to Oxford for a conference. And I heard this Russian Orthodox Archbishop, Anthony Bloom, describe faith. And he said it's a gate which suddenly opens up to reveal behind it a beautiful garden where the light is shining and catches colors and shapes and wonderful things that catch your fancy. And barely have the images recorded themselves upon your mind and your heart, then the gate suddenly closes, leaving its images from beyond imprinted nevertheless on your very lives. Faith, he says, is that urgent desire to keep before you what you saw till you enter and find your way to enter the gate for yourself. We are people of faith, inspired by the events of tonight for that very reason. It's what keeps us going. It's what keeps us serving. It's what keeps us compassionate. It's what keeps us refusing to admit that ugly is all there is. The beauty is to surround us in our lives because we have seen it in the kingdom that is to come. And our faith holds it before us. I can't think of a more brilliant way to describe tonight. Tonight we feast our eyes and our hearts and our ears, and I would say our life purpose and our meaning on this birth of Jesus. To see in the symbols around him the vulnerability and the company he keeps, the mother and the father who ponder, the angels who from the other side of existence are excited about what's going on, the peace that surpasses our understanding. To see the symbols of our own life, the things to see them as symbols of our life, the things into which we are called to grow into. That's the invitation of tonight. That same vulnerability, that same loving company of rich and poor together, that reflective spirit of gazing upon God, that contact with heavenly joy, that finding the peace in the midst of everything that is swirling around us. It's all here. It's all here for us this night. It is life-affirming, a call to be more alive than usual, a time to rediscover glory through this child, in a childlike eyes, a moment to say yes, as Mary said yes, to let Christmas be the overture of our life.